The night on the alien planet was silent, the kind of silence that made the air feel thick, almost like it was holding its breath. The only sound that broke through the stillness was the soft crunch of dry leaves under the boots of a lone figure. Marcus, a human soldier stranded on this strange world. He had been searching for hours, maybe days, for a way off the planet. His communication equipment was useless, damaged beyond repair in the crash. He had no idea where the others were, or if they were even alive. The only thing that mattered now was survival. Every step forward felt like a gamble, and every sound around him made his heart race. Suddenly, the trees ahead rustled, a movement too deliberate to be an animal. Marcus stopped dead in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. His hand instinctively reached for the weapon at his side. It was a standard-issue rifle, but he knew it was useless against whatever this planet had to offer. He could only rely on his instincts now. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was tall, taller than any human, and covered in armor that shimmered in the dim light. The figure's movements were fluid, almost graceful, yet there was a terrifying strength in its presence. It was an alien, a creature Marcus had only seen in his nightmares. His heart pounded in his chest as the alien slowly stepped closer. But this wasn't just any alien. It was the Alien Queen, the one that everyone had feared, the one who commanded armies of her kind. She was larger than any other alien he had seen before, with striking features that could have been beautiful if they weren't so alien. Her eyes glowed, an eerie shade of blue, and her voice rang out, echoing in Marcus' mind, even before she spoke. "Human, you've wandered into my world," the Alien Queen said, her voice both cold and strangely calm. "But there is no need for fear. I am not your enemy." Marcus stood frozen, unsure whether he should run or wait for whatever fate awaited him. His mind raced. What did she mean by enemy? How could she not be his enemy? She was the ruler of this alien world. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say a word, the Alien Queen raised a hand. Her fingers glowed faintly, and Marcus felt a strange pressure in the air. He couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. "You must listen to me, human," she said, her voice softer now, almost tender. "There is something you need to understand, something that will change the course of both your world and mine." Marcus wanted to ask what she meant, but his words failed him. His mind was foggy. The Alien Queen's presence was overwhelming. He could feel the weight of her power, her authority. And then she said something that sent a chill down his spine. "Our child grows within me, human." The words hung in the air, heavy and full of meaning. Marcus' eyes widened, and he took a step back, his pulse racing in his throat. What was she talking about? Was she threatening him? Was this part of her plan to conquer humanity? Before he could ask another question, the Alien Queen stepped back into the shadows, her glowing eyes the last thing he saw. The forest around him was still once again. The words she had spoken echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of something larger than he could possibly comprehend. What did it all mean? And more importantly, how was he going to survive this? The next day, Marcus could barely think straight. The words the Alien Queen had spoken echoed in his mind. "Our child grows within me, human." He couldn't shake them, no matter how hard he tried. What did it mean? Was she talking about having a baby? But why did she say it in such a strange way? He was more confused than ever. As he walked through the dense forest, trying to make sense of what had happened, he noticed something odd. The world around him was changing. The trees weren't just trees. They were alive. Alive in a way that was far beyond anything Marcus had ever seen on Earth. The plants seemed to pulse with energy, and strange lights flickered in the air. He couldn't tell if it was the environment, or if something else was affecting his senses. Then he heard it again, the sound of footsteps. Not the soft crunch of leaves this time, but a heavier, deliberate sound. He tensed, ready to fight. But then, from the shadows, the Alien Queen appeared once more. This time, there was something different about her. Her presence felt stronger, more commanding. She didn't just walk. She floated, her steps almost silent, as if the ground itself obeyed her every move. Marcus could feel the power radiating from her, and it made him uneasy. She spoke before he could even think of a question. "You are wondering why you are still alive." Her voice was calm, but there was a depth to it, a power that made Marcus's skin crawl. "You are alive because I chose you." Marcus took a step back, his mind racing. "Why me? What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice shaky. The alien queen tilted her head slightly, her glowing blue eyes never leaving his. "You are part of something much larger than you can understand." Her words seemed to press down on him, heavy with meaning. "The child I carry will change everything. It will unite two worlds, yours and mine." Marcus shook his head, still struggling to process what was happening. He had heard stories about alien invasions and strange creatures, but this was nothing like what he had imagined. "You still don't understand, do you?" she continued, her voice softer now. "The child inside me is not just any child. It is a union of our species, human and alien. This child will bring about a new era." Marcus's eyes widened. Was she saying what he thought she was saying? A hybrid child. A new beginning for both humans and aliens. It seemed impossible. "But why me? Why am I involved in this?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The queen smiled, a strange, almost sad smile. "You are not just a human, Marcus. You are a part of the plan." Her eyes glowed brighter, and Marcus felt a sudden pressure in his chest, like something was pushing against him. "I have seen your future. You will play a role in the destiny of both our species, whether you accept it or not." A wave of unease washed over Marcus. He wanted to run, to escape from this nightmare, but he couldn't. He felt trapped, like the queen's power had already wrapped itself around him. Before he could speak again, the queen turned and began to walk away, her voice trailing behind her. "We will meet again, Marcus, and when we do, you will understand everything." As the shadows swallowed her figure once more, Marcus stood frozen, his heart pounding. He was no longer sure if he was dealing with a powerful alien leader or something far more dangerous, something that had already begun to change him. The forest felt even more alien now. The trees loomed like silent watchers, and the strange lights flickered in the distance, as if waiting for the next step of whatever plan was unfolding. Marcus knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. Marcus woke up in a small, dark room, his mind still racing from the strange encounter with the alien queen. The pressure in his chest hadn't gone away, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something big. It wasn't just the alien world around him, it was the queen's words, the child she carried, his role in everything. He couldn't stay here. He needed answers. Just as Marcus was about to leave, a figure appeared in the doorway. The person was human, wearing worn-out clothes and a look of deep weariness. Marcus tensed, ready to defend himself, but the stranger raised a hand. "Don't worry, I'm not one of them." The man's voice was low, almost a whisper, as if afraid to be heard. "You're safe here for now." Marcus took a step forward. "Who are you? What's going on? Why am I here?" The man stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. He didn't seem afraid, but there was a sadness in his eyes that Marcus couldn't ignore. "My name's Elias. I've been here for a long time." Marcus blinked. "Here, you mean on this planet?" Elias nodded slowly. "Yeah, we've been stuck here ever since the Queen took over." His voice grew darker. "She's not just some ruler. She's a force. She controls everything here, and she has plans for us, plans that we can't even begin to understand." Marcus frowned, his mind racing. What kind of plans? Elias glanced around the room nervously, as if checking for spies before he spoke again. "You saw her, didn't you? The Queen?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah, I did," she said, She said her child is growing inside her, and that I'm part of some kind of plan. He paused, his voice full of doubt. I don't even know what to believe anymore. Elias' eyes grew darker, and he took a deep breath. That child, it's not just any child. It's the key to everything. His words were heavy with meaning. If she succeeds, she will unite our two species. But it won't be peace. It'll be control. She plans to use the child to merge us with her kind, to make us slaves, to rewrite everything we know. Marcus stepped back, his thoughts spinning. That's insane. Elias shook his head. No, it's not. She's already begun. That child will be powerful, too powerful for us to stop if we don't act soon. He stepped closer to Marcus, his eyes pleading. But we can still fight. There's a small group of us, humans who escaped the Queen's grasp. We've been hiding, planning. We're building a resistance. And you're going to help us. Marcus swallowed hard, his mind racing. He hadn't signed up for any of this. He was just a soldier, a guy who wanted to survive and get back home. But now he was part of something bigger, something dangerous. Why me? He asked. Why do you think I can help you? I don't even know what's going on. Elias looked him in the eyes, a strange fire burning behind them. Because you're the one the Queen chose. You're not just a human. You're the link. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The link. What do you mean? Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It looked like a simple piece of technology, but something about it felt important. He handed it to Marcus. This will help you understand. The Queen's plans are written in the stars, but this device will show you the truth. Find it. You'll see. Marcus took the device, holding it carefully. He didn't fully understand what Elias meant, but the urgency in his voice was enough to make him want to act. Elias gave him a final look. We don't have much time. The Queen's power is growing, and with it, the child she carries. It's a race against time, Marcus. Are you with us? For a long moment, Marcus just stood there, holding the device in his hands. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. He couldn't ignore this. The resistance was his only chance to find out the truth and maybe, just maybe, stop the Queen before it was too late. Finally, he nodded. Yeah, I'm with you. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and danger. Marcus had joined the human resistance, but every step he took felt like a step into the unknown. Elias and the others were skilled at staying hidden, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were always being watched. The alien world around him seemed alive, aware of their every move. The resistance group had set up camp in a series of caves hidden deep in the forest. The walls were cold and damp, and the air always felt heavy, as if the ground itself was listening for any sign of life. Marcus spent his days training, learning to move like a shadow and speak in whispers, just like the others. But the constant fear that something was out there, watching, was starting to wear on him. One evening, as Marcus sat by a small fire, his thoughts racing, he noticed something strange. The trees outside the cave seemed to shimmer, the light from the fire casting long, twisting shadows. It wasn't normal. He had seen the lights before, but this time, they felt different. More alive. Do you feel that? Marcus whispered to Elias, who sat across from him, sharpening a knife. Elias didn't look up. He knew what Marcus meant. He had been feeling it too, but he didn't want to admit it. The strange presence in the air was unsettling, like a dark cloud hanging over them, waiting to strike. Yeah, I feel it, Elias muttered. It's not just the forest. There's something else out there. Something watching us. Marcus's stomach twisted. He had always trusted his instincts, and right now, they were screaming at him. They weren't alone. Suddenly, a high-pitched sound cut through the air, a strange, almost melodic hum that seemed to vibrate deep inside Marcus's chest. His heart skipped a beat. It sounded like something calling to him. Before he could react, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The fire flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The other members of the resistance stood up, weapons ready, eyes wide with fear. They had felt it too. "What is that?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with fear. Elias's face went pale. "The Queen. She knows we're here. She's sending her soldiers." Marcus could hear the sound of movement outside the cave now. The trees rustled, but it wasn't the wind. It was something else. Something alive. The alien forces were coming. The resistance quickly gathered their things, moving with practiced speed, but Marcus could feel the panic rising in his chest. They had to leave. Now. "We need to go," Elias said urgently, grabbing Marcus's arm. "The Queen's soldiers will be here any minute. We have to move." As they scrambled to get to the back of the cave, Marcus glanced over his shoulder, unable to shake the feeling that something was watching them. The hum outside was growing louder, and the air felt thick, almost oppressive. He looked down at the device Elias had given him, the small piece of alien technology that was supposed to help them understand the Queen's plan. The device had started to glow faintly, reacting to the energy in the air. It was as if it was alive, responding to the growing power of the Queen's forces. "It's reacting to something," Marcus said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The device. It's like it's alive." Elias didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the entrance of the cave. The hum was now a constant buzz in the background, growing louder with every passing second. They had no more time. The soldiers were close. Suddenly, a shadow moved in front of the cave entrance. Marcus froze, his heart in his throat. The soldiers were here. They had found them. The figures outside were tall and armored, their bodies glowing with an eerie blue light. They were part of the Queen's army. Marcus could see their eyes, glowing with the same strange power that radiated from the Queen herself. These weren't just soldiers, they were her soldiers. And they were closing in fast. Elias motioned for them to move quickly. "We have to get out of here. Now." The group moved silently, slipping through the back of the cave and into the dense forest. Marcus's mind raced. The resistance had only planned for this to be a small mission, gathering supplies and gathering intel on the Queen's movements. But now it was clear. The Queen wasn't just planning an invasion. She had already taken control, and her forces were everywhere, watching, waiting. As Marcus ran through the forest, the device in his pocket continued to glow, almost as if it was guiding him. He didn't understand how or why, but he had the unsettling feeling that it was pulling him toward something. Toward her. The hum in the air grew louder, and Marcus could feel the presence of the Queen's soldiers behind them. They were getting closer. But he wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not when the fate of both humans and aliens hung in the balance. The night was thick with tension as Marcus and the resistance members moved deeper into the forest. The sound of the Queen's soldiers, those eerie glowing figures, was still close behind. Every step they took felt like a step closer to being caught. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest, and the weight of the device in his pocket seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. As they ran, Elias kept glancing over his shoulder, his face grim. "We can't outrun them forever." His voice was tight with urgency. "We need to find a place to hide." Marcus nodded, trying to steady his breathing. The forest around them was dense, the trees towering above them like silent sentinels. It felt like they were running in circles, but they couldn't stop. Not now. Not when the Queen's soldiers were closing in. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted. The forest seemed to open up into a small clearing, and in the center, a large rock formation stood, its jagged edges casting long shadows in the moonlight. It was their only chance to hide. "Over there," Elias pointed to the rock formation. "We can take shelter inside." They rushed toward it, ducking into the narrow opening between the rocks. Inside, the air was cool and damp, but it felt like a temporary relief from the chaos outside. They were safe for now, but Marcus knew it wouldn't last long. The Queen's soldiers were too close. Elias motioned for everyone to stay silent as they huddled in the shadows. Marcus's fingers brushed against the device in his pocket, and he felt a strange warmth radiating from it. It was like it was trying to tell him something. He pulled it out, staring at the small glowing screen. "What is this thing?" he muttered to himself, but before he could study it further, Elias spoke in a low voice. "We don't have much time." He looked over at Marcus with a mixture of concern and determination. "We need to understand what the Queen is planning. This device, it's the key." Marcus nodded, still unsure of what to make of it. As the seconds ticked by, the glow from the device grew stronger, and suddenly, it emitted a soft hum. The air around them seemed to shift, vibrating with energy. Then, something strange happened. The device began to project a faint holographic image, like a map or blueprint. At first, Marcus thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but the image grew clearer. The map showed the planet's surface, but there were strange symbols and pathways marking certain areas. It wasn't a map he recognized. It was alien. "What is this?" Marcus whispered, his heart racing, as he watched the glowing hologram. Elias leaned in, his eyes widening in shock. This is the Queen's plan." The hologram shifted, zooming in on one particular area of the map. It was a large structure, something massive, hidden deep in the heart of the planet. The symbols on the map glowed, pulsing with energy, and as Marcus watched, the symbols seemed to change, revealing a complex network of tunnels and chambers beneath the surface. "It's her stronghold," Elias said, his voice barely audible. "That's where she's keeping the child. The hybrid child. The one she's using to unite our worlds." Marcus's mind raced. He had known the Queen was powerful, but this was something else entirely. The child she carried wasn't just the key to uniting their species. It was the key to something far darker. "The Queen's plan isn't just about control," Elias continued, his voice tense. "It's about evolution. She's planning to use that child to merge our DNA with hers, to create a new breed of beings, stronger, faster, and more powerful. The child will be the catalyst for it all." The word sent a chill down Marcus's spine. A hybrid race. The merging of two species. He had thought the Queen's intentions were just about conquest, but this was much worse. Suddenly, the hologram flickered, and a new image appeared. It was a picture of the Queen, her face illuminated by the same glowing blue eyes that Marcus had seen in their first encounter. But this time, there was something different about her. She was no longer the cold, calculating ruler. There was something else, something darker in her expression. "This is what she plans to do with us," Elias whispered. "She's using us as pawns in her twisted experiment, and we have to stop her." Marcus felt a surge of anger rise inside him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about finding a way off this planet. This was about fighting back. The Queen had gone too far. The resistance had to stop her, no matter the cost. Just then, they heard it, the sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, and getting closer. The Queen's soldiers had found them. "We have to move. Now." Elias hissed. He grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him to his feet. "The only way we're going to stop this is to get to that stronghold." Marcus looked at the glowing device in his hand, the map still visible in the air. The Queen's plan was clear now, and it was up to them to destroy it before it was too late. But first, they had to survive the coming battle. The air was thick with tension as Marcus and the resistance huddled in the narrow cave, their hearts racing with the sound of footsteps drawing nearer. The Queen's soldiers were closing in fast, their heavy boots thudding against the ground, echoing through the night. The holographic map from the device still glowed faintly, showing the Queen's stronghold deep beneath the surface of the planet. It was their only chance to stop her plans, but first, they had to survive the soldiers on their trail. "They're almost here," Elias whispered urgently, his eyes flicking between Marcus and the entrance of the cave. "We can't stay here much longer." Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The soldiers were relentless, and they were already so close. They had no time to waste. "Where do we go?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with anxiety. He could hear the faint hum of the soldiers' energy weapons powering up outside the cave. There was no escaping them unless they acted fast. Elias grabbed the device from Marcus's hand, looking at the glowing map. "We need to move east. There's an old underground tunnel system that the Queen's forces don't know about. It should lead us close to the stronghold." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't fully trust the map or the information from the device, but there was no time to question it. They had no choice but to follow Elias's lead. "Let's go," Marcus said, his voice steadied despite the fear that gripped him. The group moved quickly through the darkness, navigating the tight cave passages with practiced ease. The footsteps of the soldiers were now so close that Marcus could almost feel their breath on the back of his neck. They had to stay silent, move quickly, or they would be trapped. The tunnel was narrow, the walls slick with moisture. Every step felt like an eternity. The only light came from the faint glow of the device in Marcus's hand and the distant, eerie hum of the soldiers hunting them. As they reached a larger cavern, Elias held up a hand, signaling for them to stop. He crouched low, peering around the corner. Marcus did the same, his breath shallow, his eyes scanning the dark shadows. The soldiers were right behind them. "They're getting closer," Elias muttered, his voice tense. "We have to make a run for it. Once we're past them, we'll head for the tunnel." Marcus nodded, his muscles tensing, ready to sprint. He had no idea how far the tunnel would take them, but he knew that if they didn't move now, they would be caught. "On my mark," Elias whispered. He took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing with determination. 3, 2, 1, go. They ran. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the cavern as they sprinted toward the narrow passageway. Behind them, the Queen's soldiers followed, their heavy boots thumping against the ground. But Marcus didn't dare look back. He focused only on the path ahead, on the dim glow of the tunnel that promised safety, if they could just get there in time. As they neared the entrance, Marcus felt a sharp pain in his side. He stumbled, but Elias caught him, pulling him forward. "Keep moving," Elias shouted. "We're almost there." With a final burst of speed, they reached the tunnel and dove into the darkness. The entrance was narrow, just wide enough for them to squeeze through. But once inside, the tunnel expanded into a wide, empty space. It was cold and silent, a perfect hiding place. They paused to catch their breath, their chests heaving with exhaustion. The sounds of the soldiers faded as the tunnel swallowed them up. For a moment, it felt like they were safe. But Marcus knew it wouldn't last long. The Queen's soldiers were relentless. They would follow them into the tunnels if they had to. "We need to keep moving," Elias said, his voice low but urgent. "This tunnel will take us close to her stronghold. We're running out of time." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. The Queen was more powerful than he had ever imagined, and now that they were in her territory, there was no turning back. The resistance had to stop her. They had to stop the hybrid child from being born, before it was too late. They moved through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls were smooth, but they felt cold and unwelcoming. It was as if the tunnel itself was alive, watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. As they walked deeper into the darkness, the faint glow of the device seemed to grow brighter. It was leading them somewhere, guiding them through the maze of tunnels. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something else was guiding them too. Something much darker. Something the Queen had set in motion. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a large chamber. The walls of the cavern were covered in strange symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. In the center of the room was a massive door, circular and made of a metal that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy. "This is it," Elias said, his voice barely a whisper. This is the entrance to her stronghold. Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding. This was it, the final step. They were about to face the Queen herself. But as he reached out to touch the door, a cold voice echoed through the chamber. "I knew you would come, Marcus." Marcus froze. He knew that voice, the voice of the Queen. She was waiting for them. The chamber was silent except for the faint hum of energy from the strange door in front of them. Marcus's heart raced as he stood frozen in place. He could feel the Queen's presence, as if she were everywhere, her cold gaze resting on him, even though she hadn't yet appeared. Elias, standing beside him, slowly turned, his face pale. "She's here." Marcus barely had time to react before the shadows at the far side of the room shifted. A figure emerged, tall and imposing. The Queen. Her skin shimmered with an ethereal, silvery glow, her eyes a piercing, unnatural blue that seemed to see through him. Her long, flowing robes moved with an unsettling grace, and her presence radiated power, more than Marcus had ever imagined. "I knew you would come, Marcus," she said again, her voice smooth like silk, but with an edge of something dark and dangerous. Marcus's throat tightened, but he forced himself to speak. "What have you done to us?" His voice was steady, though inside, everything felt like it was shaking apart. "What's your plan? What are you going to do with the child?" The Queen tilted her head, a smile curling at the corners of her lips. "You don't understand yet, do you?" she said softly, stepping closer. "The child is not just a weapon or a tool. It is the key to uniting our species, human and alien, to evolve beyond what we are. The child will lead us to a new future where we are all stronger, more powerful than ever before. The merging of our DNA will create something extraordinary." Marcus's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle finally clicking together. The hybrid child. The Queen had planned this for years, using the child to manipulate and control both species. She wasn't just trying to conquer. She wanted to create a new order, a new race of beings that would be unstoppable. And she intended for that child to be the catalyst. Elias stepped forward, his voice cold and determined. "We won't let you do this." The Queen's smile only widened. "You think you can stop me?" Her eyes glowed brighter, and for a moment, the air around them seemed to hum with power. "You've already lost. The resistance is nothing. You are nothing." Before Marcus could respond, the ground trembled, and the massive door behind the Queen began to open. A soft, glowing light poured out from the cracks, and within it, Marcus saw something that took his breath away. It was the child. Or rather, it was part of the child. Floating in the center of the chamber, suspended by an invisible force, was a small figure. It wasn't fully formed, but it was unmistakably a hybrid. A child with both human and alien features. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes glowed with the same eerie blue light as the Queen's. The child's mere presence seemed to radiate an otherworldly energy, and Marcus could feel the weight of its power. That's the child," Elias whispered, his voice filled with a mix of awe and horror. The Queen's voice cut through the silence. "It is my masterpiece, the beginning of a new era, and you will not stop it." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest as he looked at the child. It wasn't just a weapon. It was the future. The Queen had created this creature to rule, to unite, to reshape the galaxy in her image, and it was growing stronger every moment. But Marcus couldn't let it happen. Not like this. "We have to destroy it," Marcus said urgently, his eyes locked on Elias. "We can't let her complete the hybridization. If we do, we'll never be able to stop them." Elias nodded grimly, his hand going to the weapon at his side. "We end this now." The Queen let out a laugh, dark and cold. "You think you can defeat me? You think your weapons can stop what I have created? You are nothing compared to the power I hold." But just as she spoke, the air around them seemed to change. The device Marcus had been carrying, the one that had guided them, began to glow brighter, its soft hum growing into a fierce, resonating sound. The symbols on it shifted, matching the strange patterns on the walls of the chamber. Marcus stared at it, realization hitting him like a thunderclap. The device wasn't just a map. It was a key. The Queen's power was tied to the child, and the device could disrupt that link. It could stop her from completing her twisted plan. The device, Marcus whispered. It's the key to stopping her. Without thinking, Marcus rushed forward, charging at the Queen. The resistance members followed, weapons drawn, ready for the final battle. But the Queen, sensing their move, raised her hand, and the very air seemed to crackle with power. The room trembled as if a storm was brewing, and with a sharp, commanding gesture, the Queen summoned a barrier of energy, blocking their path. "Fools," the Queen hissed. "You cannot stop me." Marcus didn't hesitate. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the device, and as he held it high, the energy inside it pulsed in response to the Queen's power. The device began to glow fiercely, sending out a wave of energy that clashed against the Queen's barrier. The ground shook violently, and for a moment, Marcus feared that the entire chamber would collapse. But then, the energy from the device exploded outward, shattering the Queen's barrier and sending her staggering back. "No!" the Queen shrieked, her voice filled with rage and fear. The child, still suspended in the air, began to flicker, its form destabilizing as the power from the device disrupted the Queen's control over it. The glowing blue light dimmed, and the child's body began to disintegrate, its unnatural energy crumbling away into nothingness. With a final, anguished scream, the Queen fell to her knees. Her power shattered, and the air around them grew still. Marcus stood panting, the device still glowing in his hand, but the Queen's dark presence was gone. The child, her creation, was no more. They had won. The resistance slowly approached, the weight of their victory settling in. The Queen was defeated, and her twisted plan had been stopped. But the cost of it all, the loss of life, the destruction of the hybrid child, was not lost on them. They had changed the future, but at a great cost. Elias placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, his voice soft but proud. "We did it." Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes staring at the now empty chamber. The fight was over, but the scars of this war would remain. They had defeated the Queen, but the story wasn't over. A new chapter was beginning.